How to negotiate anything without being a jerk. A few simple phrases and tactics can save you thousands of dollars, but most people are too uncomfortable to use them. And that discomfort is costing you way more money than you realize. Most people think negotiating means being aggressive, pushy, or manipulative, so they avoid it completely. They pay full price for cars, accept the first salary offer, and never question prices because they don't want to be difficult or rude. But here's the truth. The best negotiators aren't jerks. They're just people who understand a few simple psychological principles and know the right phrases to use. Today, I'm going to show you 3 powerful negotiation tactics that work in almost any situation, from buying a car to asking for a raise. And none of them require you to be mean or aggressive. Here's why most people are terrible at negotiating. They think it's all about winning and losing, about getting the best deal at the other person's expense. So they either go in too aggressive and damage the relationship, or they avoid negotiating completely because they don't want to be that person. But that's not what negotiation is actually about. Good negotiation is about finding outcomes that work for both sides. It's about clear communication, understanding what each person needs, and working together to find solutions. You can be kind, respectful, and likable while still getting a better deal. The problem is that nobody teaches you how to do this. You're not born knowing how to negotiate. It's not something they cover in school. So most people just wing it based on what they've seen in movies or what they think negotiation should look like, and they end up either being too passive or too aggressive. This costs you real money. Think about all the times in your life when you could have negotiated but didn't. That car you bought at asking price when the dealer probably would have come down $2,000. That apartment lease you signed without asking if the rent was flexible. That job offer you accepted without countering the salary. That furniture you bought at full price when the store was probably willing to discount it. All of those situations added up to thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars that you left on the table. Not because you couldn't afford to negotiate, not because the other person wasn't willing to negotiate, but because you didn't know how to do it without feeling like a jerk. And it's not just about money. Negotiation skills affect every part of your life. Getting your landlord to fix problems faster, dividing household responsibilities with your partner, working out conflicts with friends, setting boundaries at work. All of these require negotiation skills, and most people handle them badly because they don't have the right tools. The other problem is that even when people try to negotiate, they make predictable mistakes that kill their chances of getting a good deal. They talk too much when they should be quiet. They accept the first counteroffer when they should push back. They fail to set strong anchors at the beginning. They ask weak questions that don't move the negotiation forward. These mistakes aren't because people are bad at negotiating. They're because people don't know the specific tactics that actually work. And the tactics that work aren't complicated or aggressive. They're simple psychological principles that anyone can learn and use. Let me break down 3 powerful negotiation tactics that will immediately improve your results. These work whether you're buying a car, negotiating a salary, haggling at a market, or trying to get a better deal on literally anything. Tactic number 1, the power of silence. Stop talking first. The first tactic is probably the hardest one for most people, but it's also the most powerful. After you make an offer or state your position, shut up completely. Don't explain, don't justify, don't fill the silence. Just wait for the other person to respond. This is incredibly difficult because silence feels uncomfortable. When you make an offer and the other person doesn't immediately respond, your brain starts panicking. You want to fill that silence with explanations, justifications, or even a better offer. Your instinct is to keep talking, but that instinct is killing your negotiation power. Here's why silence works so well. First, whoever speaks first after an offer usually loses ground. If you make an offer and then immediately start talking, you're signaling that you're uncomfortable with your own offer. You're basically telling the other person that your number's flexible before they even respond. You're negotiating against yourself. Now, let's say you're buying a used car and the seller's asking $10,000. You offer $8,000. If you then immediately say, I could maybe go a bit higher, I just think 8 is fair for the condition. You've already told the seller you're willing to pay more than 8. You just weakened your position without the seller saying a single word. But if you offer 8,000 and then say nothing, the pressure shifts to the seller. They have to respond. They have to either accept, counter, or explain why 8,000 doesn't work for them. And whatever they say next gives you information about their position and flexibility. Second, silence makes the other person uncomfortable too, and people often make concessions just to break the silence. When you make an offer and go quiet, the other person feels pressure to fill that silence. And often they'll do that by either accepting your offer or making a counteroffer that's closer to your number than they originally planned. I once negotiated a salary for a job. The hiring manager asked what I was looking for. I gave a number and then stopped talking. The silence lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like 10 minutes. Finally, the hiring manager said, "Okay, we can do that." I hadn't expected them to accept my first number. If I had kept talking and said, "But I'm flexible," or "What do you think?" I probably would have ended up with less. Third, silence gives you time to think. Negotiation moves fast, and it's easy to say yes to something you should push back on, or to make a concession you don't need to make. By forcing yourself to pause and stay quiet, you give your brain a few extra seconds to process what's happening and decide on your next move. The key is that silence needs to be calm and confident, not awkward or aggressive. You're not trying to create tension or make the other person uncomfortable. You're just giving them space to respond without rushing to fill every gap in the conversation. Here's how to actually use this tactic. After you state your offer or position, close your mouth. If you need to do something with your body to avoid talking, take a sip of water, look at a document, or just maintain relaxed eye contact. Count to 10 in your head if you need to, but don't speak until the other person responds. When they do respond, listen fully before you say anything. Don't interrupt. Don't jump in with a counter. Let them finish their entire thought. Then, if you need to think about their response, take another pause before you reply. This tactic feels unnatural at first because we're trained to keep conversations flowing and to avoid awkward silences. But in negotiation, those awkward silences are where the power lives. Get comfortable with silence, and you'll instantly become a better negotiator. Tactic number 2, anchoring. Control the frame with the first number. The second tactic is called anchoring, and it's one of the most researched and proven psychological effects in negotiation. The first number mentioned in a negotiation has a massive influence on the final outcome, even when everyone knows it's just an opening position. Here's how anchoring works in your brain. When you hear a number, your brain uses it as a reference point for everything that comes after. Even if that number is completely unreasonable, it still affects how you think about other numbers. If I'm selling you a used laptop and I say, "I'm thinking around $800, that 800 becomes the anchor. It sets the frame for the entire negotiation. Even if you think that's too high, your counteroffer will probably be relative to that 800. You might offer 600, which feels like a reasonable discount from the anchor. But what if I had anchored at 500 instead? Then your counteroffer might be 400. We'd probably end up somewhere between 4 and 500 instead of between 6 and 800. The anchor changed the entire range of the negotiation. This is why the first number is so important. Whoever sets the anchor controls the frame. And contrary to what a lot of people think, you usually want to be the one who names a number first, not wait for the other person to go first. A lot of negotiation advice tells you to never name your price first, to wait for the other side to show their cards. But research shows that's usually wrong. If you let the other side anchor first, you're letting them control the frame. You want to be the one setting the anchor, as long as you set it strategically. Here's how to anchor effectively. First, do your research so you know what a reasonable range is for whatever you're negotiating. If you're negotiating a salary, research what people in similar roles make. If you're buying a car, look up what similar cars sell for. You need to know the realistic range before you can set a good anchor. Second, set your anchor at the far end of reasonable, but not so far that you lose credibility. If you're selling something, anchor high. If you're buying something, anchor low. But don't go so extreme that the other person laughs at you or walks away immediately. Let's say you're negotiating a salary and you know the realistic range for this position is 60 to 75,000. If you're currently making 55, you might be tempted to ask for 60 as your anchor. But that's a mistake. You should anchor higher, maybe at 75 or even 80. Even if you don't get 80, anchoring there makes 70 or 75 feel like a compromise. If you anchor at 60, the employer might counter at 57, and you'll end up somewhere around 58. But if you anchor at 80, they might counter at 68, and you'll end up at 72. Same negotiation, different outcome, all because of where you set the anchor. Here's a real example from my life. I was selling some used furniture online. I listed a couch for $300 even though I would have been happy with $200. The first person who contacted me offered $250. I countered at $280. We settled at $270. If I had anchored at $200, they probably would have offered $150 and we would have settled somewhere around $175. That $100 difference came entirely from where I set the initial anchor. The psychological reason anchoring works is something called insufficient adjustment. When people hear an anchor, they know they're supposed to adjust away from it based on other information. But research shows they don't adjust far enough. They're pulled toward the anchor even when they consciously know it's too high or too low. One warning about anchoring: it has to be somewhat defensible. If you're selling a used Honda Civic and you anchor at $50,000, you just look stupid and you lose all credibility. The anchor needs to be within the realm of possibility, even if it's at the optimistic end of that realm. Also, when you set an anchor, say it confidently and then stop talking. Don't apologize for your number. Don't explain it away. Don't say, "but I'm flexible." State your anchor and then use tactic number 1. Shut up and let them respond. If the other person is the one who anchors first, you need to recognize what's happening and not let their anchor trap you. If someone offers you a job at $50,000 and you were hoping for 70, don't negotiate relative to their 50. Push back hard and try to reset the anchor. Say something like, "I appreciate the offer, but based on my research and the market rate for this position, I was expecting something in the 70 to 80 range." You're trying to introduce a new anchor to replace theirs. Anchoring works in so many situations. Negotiating prices, obviously, but also things like dividing up chores at home. Whoever suggests the initial division of responsibilities is anchoring. Negotiating project deadlines at work. Whoever suggests the first timeline is anchoring. Even deciding where to go for dinner with friends. Whoever makes the first suggestion is anchoring. Everyone's thinking about what kind of food to get. Learn to recognize anchors when other people use them on you, and learn to set strong anchors when you're negotiating. This one tactic will improve your negotiation outcomes more than almost anything else. Tactic number 3, the magic question. Is that the best you can do? The third tactic is a simple question that makes a huge difference. Is that the best you can do? Or variations like, is there any flexibility on that price? Or, can you do any better? This question is magic because it's polite, non-confrontational, and it puts gentle pressure on the other person to improve their offer without you having to make a counteroffer first. Here's why this works. When you ask if someone can do better, you're not saying their offer's bad or insulting them. You're just asking if there's any room for improvement. Most people, when asked this question directly, will either improve their offer or explain why they can't. Either outcome is good for you. If they improve their offer, great. You just got a better deal without having to negotiate back and forth. If they explain why they can't improve it, you've gathered information about their constraints and bottom line, which helps you decide what to do next. Let's walk through some examples. You're buying a couch at a furniture store. The salesperson quotes you $1,200. You ask, is that the best price you can do? Outcome: A, the salesperson says, let me check with my manager, and comes back with $1,100. You just saved $100 with one simple question. Outcome B, the salesperson says, that's already our sale price, but I could include free delivery. You just got added value without lowering the price. Outcome C, the salesperson says, that's firm, we don't discount this brand. Now you know they're not going to negotiate on price, so you can decide if you want to pay $1,200 or look elsewhere. At least you have clarity. All three outcomes are better than not asking the question at all. You're negotiating a salary. The company offers you $65,000. You say, I'm excited about the opportunity. Is there any flexibility on the salary? Outcome A, they come back with $68. You just got a $3,000 raise without having to argue for it. Outcome B, they say the salary is set for this level, but we can offer extra vacation days or a signing bonus. You just opened up new things to negotiate that you might not have known were on the table. Outcome C, they say that's the top of the range for this position. Now you know their constraint and you can decide if you want to accept or negotiate other aspects like title, responsibilities, or future raise schedule. The key to this question is the tone. You're not demanding or aggressive. You're curious and friendly. You're asking a genuine question, not making an accusation. The words matter, but how you say them matters even more. Is that the best you can do? Said with a friendly, curious tone, is an invitation to negotiate. The same words said with an aggressive or skeptical tone become confrontational and put people on the defensive. You can also soften it even more by adding context. I really want to make this work. Is there any flexibility on the price? Or, I'm trying to stay within my budget. Can you do any better on that? These versions acknowledge that you're trying to reach an agreement, not just trying to squeeze every penny out of them. This question also works because of a psychological principle called consistency. Most people want to feel like they're giving you their best offer or being fair. When you ask directly if they can do better, they're forced to either improve their offer or explicitly state that they won't. Many people feel uncomfortable saying, no, I could go lower, but I'm choosing not to. So they end up making a concession. The magic question also works great in combination with the other tactics. You can anchor with a low offer, wait silently for their counter, and when they counter, ask, is that the best you can do? You're using all three tactics together in one negotiation. Here's a real situation where I use this. I was getting quotes for some home repairs. The first contractor quoted me $5,000. Instead of countering with a specific number, I just asked, is that your best price? Or is there any room to work with me on this? He immediately dropped it to $4,500 without me having to negotiate at all. Then I could decide if I wanted to push further or accept the $4,500. One important note, don't overuse this question. Ask it once, maybe twice if you're in a complex negotiation with multiple rounds. But if you ask it 5 times, you start to look like you're just fishing for discounts and you lose credibility. Also, be prepared to accept their answer. If you ask if they can do better and they say no, don't immediately counter with a lower number anyway. If you do that, they'll learn that your question was just a tactic and they'll ignore it in future negotiations. Trust their answer or push back in a different way. The magic question is particularly effective in situations where you don't know what the realistic range is. If you're negotiating something unfamiliar and you're not sure what to anchor at, you can let them go first and then use the magic question to see if there's any give in their number. You're gathering information without committing to a specific counteroffer yet. This also works in non-price negotiations. If someone proposes a project deadline that's tight for you, ask, is there any flexibility on that timeline? If your landlord says they can't fix something until next month, ask, is there any way to get that done sooner? You're using the same principle, asking politely if improvement is possible without being demanding or confrontational. Here's what changed my entire perspective on negotiation, and I think it'll change yours too. Negotiation isn't about conflict, it's about communication. Most people avoid negotiating because they think it means fighting with someone or trying to take advantage of them. But that's not what negotiation is. Negotiation is just two people trying to reach an agreement that works for both of them. And clear, honest communication makes that easier, not harder. When you stay silent after making an offer, you're not being rude, you're giving the other person space to think and respond. When you set an anchor, you're not being unreasonable. You're clearly stating what you want so the other person knows where you stand. When you ask if someone can do better, you're not being pushy. You're directly asking a question instead of making assumptions. All of these tactics are actually more respectful than avoiding negotiation. When you don't negotiate, you're not being polite. You're just avoiding an uncomfortable conversation. And that avoidance often leads to resentment or regret later. The person selling you something expects you to negotiate. The hiring manager making you an offer expects you to negotiate. The contractor giving you a quote expects you to negotiate. They've built room for negotiation into their initial number specifically because they expect it. When you don't negotiate, you're not being nice. You're just leaving money on the table that they were willing to give you anyway. I used to think negotiating made me difficult or cheap, but then I realized something. The people who are good at negotiating aren't jerks. They're just people who are comfortable asking for what they want. And being comfortable asking for what you want is a life skill that goes way beyond money. When you learn to negotiate, you're really learning how to advocate for yourself. You're learning how to communicate clearly about what you need. You're learning how to handle uncomfortable conversations. You're learning how to push back on things that don't work for you instead of just accepting whatever you're given. These skills matter in every area of life. Negotiating with your employer is the same skill set as negotiating boundaries with family. Negotiating prices is the same skill set as negotiating household responsibilities with a partner. It's all communication, boundary setting, and clear articulation of what you want. Let me recap the 3 negotiation tactics that will save you thousands of dollars and make you better at every kind of negotiation. First, the power of silence. After you make an offer or state your position, stop talking. Don't explain, don't justify, don't fill the uncomfortable silence. Whoever speaks first after an offer usually loses ground. Silence makes the other person uncomfortable and often leads them to make concessions. It also gives you time to think instead of reacting immediately. Practice being comfortable with silence in negotiations, and you'll immediately see better results. Second, anchoring. The first number mentioned in a negotiation has enormous influence on the final outcome. Set your anchor at the far end of reasonable, high if you're selling, low if you're buying. Do your research first so you know what's reasonable, then anchor strategically. Don't be afraid to go first with a number. Whoever sets the anchor controls the frame for the entire negotiation. State your anchor confidently and then use tactic 1. Shut up and let them respond. Third, the magic question. Ask, is that the best you can do? Or, is there any flexibility on that? This simple, polite question puts gentle pressure on the other person to improve their offer without you having to make a specific counteroffer. Say it with a friendly, curious tone, not an aggressive one. Be prepared to accept their answer. This question works because it's a direct communication that gives them a chance to improve their offer or explain their constraints. Either way, you end up with more information and often a better deal. These 3 tactics work together. You can anchor with your opening offer, stay silent while they process it, and when they counter, ask if they can do better. You're combining psychological principles that have been proven to work across thousands of negotiations. The key is that none of these tactics require you to be mean, aggressive, or manipulative. They're all about clear communication, confidence, and understanding basic psychology. You can be kind, respectful, and likable while still being an effective negotiator. Start practicing these tactics in low-stakes situations. Negotiate at a garage sale or flea market. Ask for a discount at a local shop. Try countering the next time someone makes you an offer for something. The more you practice, the more natural it will feel, and the more money you'll save over time. Remember that the person on the other side expects negotiation. You're not being difficult by using these tactics. You're just playing the game the way it's meant to be played. And when both sides negotiate clearly and honestly, you usually end up with better outcomes for everyone. Subscribe for more practical psychology that saves you money.